Welcome back to Not Everything's Political with Erick Erickson as part of the Resurgent and WSB, doing these conversations with folks in and around politics about anything but politics. Today's guest, Jake Tapper from CNN. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my honor. Thanks so much, Eric.
So I want to talk to you about cartoons because every once in a while we get to see this on Twitter. You actually are really good at drawing cartoons, something I am absolutely incapable of doing.
Well, I don't know if I'm really good. I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to be a cartoonist professionally. I did it in high school. I did it in college. I tried to get a syndicated comic strip. I came close in the early 90s, but I didn't quite get there. And since then, I did a lot of freelance cartooning for the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Washington Post, and I did stuff for the American Spectator, and I had a weekly comic strip with Roll Call back when Roll Call was, I think, a weekly newspaper, maybe twice a week. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, when I joined ABC News, they said I had to hang up the pen. So I pretty much did. But it's a real joy, and I collect a lot of cartoon stuff at home, original comics from like the 50s and 60s, Doonesbury's and Pogo, and it's a real joy of mine. I'm trying to get my kids into it, but they're not really biting. I think when you're raised on animation the way that they are, right, still on a page isn't as cool.
So what's your favorite cartoon?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess Doonesbury was my favorite. During the era. I mean, he's pretty much, except for Sundays, he's in reruns now.
Right.
But the era of Doonesbury in the 70s and 80s, which was, I just found like a very, very funny and biting and clever commentary on not just politics but social mores and life. I really loved Peanuts growing up too. Mm-hmm. I loved the comics. I loved Peanuts. I loved Pogo. I guess those three were the big ones, but there are a bunch of other ones that I really like Little Abner, mm-hmm, as well. And at home, I have like the volume collections of like every single strip by
nice
by these people. But I guess those four: Doonesbury, Peanuts, Little Abner, and Pogo.
I was always a Calvin and Hobbes and Far Side guy.
I love those. They're great. I have their collections too. I mean, those are wonderful, wonderful comic strips. It's going to sound odd to say it, but they're a little late for me. Like my love of cartoons came way before Calvin and Hobbes and Far Side, but they're brilliant. They're absolutely, mm-hmm, those two are both brilliant. I have those collections as well.
So, how did you get into first your cartoons, and you also do a lot of writing and transition into being someone in front of the camera? How did that happen?
Well, it just kind of life makes plans for you, and right. I wanted to be a comic strip cartoonist. At the end of the day, it's probably better that it didn't work out, just because my desire to be a newspaper cartoonist came right at the very beginning of newspapers dying. And years later, when I met Gary Trudeau, he told me that he tells people who he meets who want to like follow in his footsteps that they should take up animation and move to Hollywood, because that's where cartooning is living today, whereas newspaper comic strips are it's tough. I mean, you could be back in like the 70s and 80s, you could be a multimillionaire cartoonist. Mm-hmm. And it's really tough to be that now because there's so few papers that publish them. I guess what just happened is just I failed. I mean, I wasn't able to become a full-time cartoonist. And so I also started doing writing, and then along with the first journalistic forays I made were not political at all. It was just basic journalism about things that interested me, celebrity stuff for Entertainment Weekly, or random other stuff in Washington, D.C. that I wrote for Washington City Paper or for the Washington Post Style section. And the reporting that just did better. I just thrived more, mm-hmm, and that career just people were willing to pay me a lot more to do that than they were to pay me to be a cartoonist. But there were times in the 90s when I was trying to figure out how can I make a living as a cartoonist, and I came up with like ways. Well, if I, I'm getting this much a week from this publication for roll call for doing a comic strip once a week. I think it was probably like $200 a comic or something. So I was just figuring out, okay, how can I replicate that so that I make, somewhere between $30,000 and whatever a year, and just I can make a living, and then that will be my focus. But I just could never get there. And I came up with, I had an alt weekly character called Max Zeitgeist, 20-something detective. This was in the early 90s, so it was a lot. It sounds like a cliche, but at the time it was kind of like on the edge. But and I got the addresses of every single alt weekly in the country and sent them, and I figured like if I got 10 of them to pay me $10 a week, that's $100, right. Or that's $1,000, right? And whatever. I mean, or that way, 10 of them to $10 a week is $100. Okay, but in any case, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it was that kind of. I'm not good at math. It was that kind of addition. I was just like, how can I make it happen? But ultimately, I just couldn't make it work. And it's not a field where you really can call shots. I mean, it's one of these things. Like I would do illustrations for the Washington Post of just anything. Of just trying to anticipate what they might need on any given day to illustrate to break up the monotony of the op-ed page, and so you draw whatever, a mailbox, you draw a coin, you draw a dollar bill, whatever, and just like send like 30 of them into the Washington Post, and like they don't they use it or they don't, and if they use it they pay you like $100 or whatever. But they don't tell you. You just like pick up the paper and it's in there or it's not. So it was a real feast or famine kind of field, and like ultimately the people started paying me a lot more and are offering me full-time jobs for the writing, and that's just the direction it went.
Well, so you have done, I mean, cartoons and the writing, and now in front of the camera. And what was the biggest transition for you, being a writer to being someone who's actually on TV all the time?
Well, it's a whole different. The writing for TV and writing for print are obviously very, very different, and it's not just that you can be much longer in print. It's also just writing to picture. You need to do that in TV. Writing to sound, you can do that in TV. Grabbing people more, making it more compelling early on, and writing for print is different. And also, like writing for print, are you writing a 500-word piece or you're writing a 10,000-word piece? Because at City Paper, we would do, once every 5 or 6 weeks, we had to do a cover story, and those have to be somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 words. This is under the late, great David Carr. So that's very different. Also, learning broadcast skills is a whole other weird thing. And it's just common sense, but your voice has to sound a certain way, and your presentation has to be a little different, and you can't. It's a lot of like, do these 30 things, and oh, by the way, sound authentic, and which is difficult to do. You know this as a broadcaster as well. So yeah, I mean, it's not entirely a different field, but it's very distant. It's in the same way that like badminton and football are both athletic endeavors, but they're really not very similar. I mean, there are things that are similar, but in terms of like being in shape or in terms of like exercising, but other than that, it's very different. So yeah, I mean, it's a whole different field. I can't watch early clips of myself. I mean, on TV,
I can't watch any clips of myself.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is I don't watch any clips of myself either. Yeah.
I mean, even being mostly on radio now, I hate to hear my voice. And you mentioned exercising, but having had a couple of talks lately about doing TV stuff and mindful, I got to get myself back in shape. It's widescreen TVs and everything else. It's just that there's a whole extra element to being on TV that is so aggravating and necessary.
The camera does add pounds. I mean, it's just a fact. I mean, the camera adds a lot of weight to people. I know this. I've lost 15 pounds this year, and I did it for health reasons, not for appearance reasons. But I look at video of me like a year or two ago, and I'm like, God, I look so jowly. And it's, I mean, part of it is just like the camera really does add weight, and so it's rather unforgiving.
Well, so how does your family deal with you being on TV? Because my kids get freaked out if I get recognized anywhere with them in public. And I guess to a degree, there's a difference between living in Macon, Georgia, and Washington, where there are so many recognizable people around. But is it a balance for them?
First of all, it's only really relatively recently that I get recognized. When I go out, it's only real in terms of it happening like almost every time. It's probably more just in the last year or two, to be honest, since everybody started paying a lot more attention to politics and to cable. So I don't know what they think about it. I mean, our family life is pretty normal, and it's really focused a lot on going to Little League games and playing Legos and that sort of, and sleepovers and that sort of thing. So there isn't a lot of, I think that it's more often than, kids don't watch cable news.
Thank God for that.
Yeah. But their parents might, but the kids don't. So I mean, they know that I'm on TV, but, I don't think they really have any idea of what it means or anything other than this is, it's always been this way. My daughter was born in 2007. So for her first year of her life, I was a campaign reporter mainly covering Obama in 07, 08. And so for her first year of her life, she would watch, I'd be on the road all the time, and my wife would watch TV. And so my baby girl would see 15 seconds of me on the road in Iowa or whatever, then 2 minutes of Obama in the piece, because if I was covering Obama, or 2 minutes of McCain or whatever, and then 15 seconds of me. So Obama was one of her first words, just because it's easy to say, and also it was said all the time when watching me. But in terms of me being on TV, I think they kind of just got used to it. It was just it's always been that way. Daddy's on TV.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So I do have to ask, I mean, speaking of Little League games and everything else, you being from Philly, have you ever wanted to throw batteries at someone on TV, just being from Philly?
just because I'm a Philly fan? Yes. Yes, and ice balls too.
Yeah,
snowballs that are really frozen. Never at Santa Claus, as was done famously or infamously at an Eagles game. But yeah, no. I mean, that's part of being a Philly fan, is having that kind of really angry, loud side of you that wants to. My kids don't like watching sports with me because I get really emotionally invested in the game.
Well, it's good to get emotionally invested in something other than politics these days.
Oh God, yes, absolutely.
Well, and I don't want to get into politics here, but we are in the season where it seems like everybody is at each other's throat these days, and you are admirably one of the people who I think is just as tough on this administration as you were on the last. And it's really funny for me to see people who were cheering you on for 8 years suddenly be angry at you for daring to ask tough questions. And does it ever get tiring?
Thank you for remembering, by the way, because
yes.
I'm always, it's so annoying when people, well, did you didn't cover Benghazi? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I did it a lot, and I took it very seriously. And it's funny because, we're in this debate right now, and the world is in this debate about Gold Star families. And I had the mother of one of the victims of Benghazi on the show several times, Sean Smith's mom. And I never understood, and we talked about this on TV, I never understood why the Obama administration, and more specifically Secretary Clinton, didn't reach out to her to offer sympathies, because there's so much that's just basic human decency. You want to say, sometimes people just want to know that you hear them and that you see them and that you care enough to know the name of the person who died carrying out this mission that you ordered. And I never really understood that. And now that was something we discussed in the previous administration, and now we're discussing it again. And it's just, it's just an era where people would just be a little bit more decent. There was last week I did a Twitter thread where I said, let's just do a thought experiment.
Yeah, I retweeted this one.
Oh, thanks. Let's just assume everybody had the best intentions here. Let's just assume everybody had the best intentions. And so President Trump called this woman. This is before General Kelly came out and explained his side of the story, which basically is this: he was trying to do good here, which I totally believe. So he's trying to do good here. And then we have to assume good intentions of Congresswoman Wilson too, that she felt the family was wronged and she wanted to seek justice for them. You can obviously debate and say, well, maybe she should have done it privately or this or that, but okay, but I'm just talking about intentions here. And at the end of the day, assuming the best intentions of everybody, General Kelly, Congresswoman Wilson, President Trump, you still end up with a call that went wrong. And, I don't know why the president and the White House wouldn't just say, okay, let's just try to fix this. But everyone just assumes the worst intentions in everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I asked people to engage in this thought experiment, and so many people were just incapable of it.
Right.
They were just like, well, I'll do that, but I won't assume the best intentions for President Trump. But that's what the experiment is. That's
right.
Then you're not engaging. I'll do that, but Congresswoman Wilson was totally, politicized. I get it. I understand the criticism of everybody in this except for the widow. I haven't heard any criticism of her, nor do I think there should be. But what? Just try to assume the best intentions here. Just try.
Right.
But we're in a place now where nobody wants to.
It's so frustrating, which is one reason I have started really enjoying having these conversations with people is where we can kind of get away from the daily squabbling about politics that's never ending and frustrating on all sides. So before we get out of here, though, I've got one question that I've tried to ask everybody, sometimes failing, but that is excluding the cool stuff like super speed, flying, seeing through walls, X-ray vision, that sort of stuff. If there was a mediocre superpower that could improve just Jake Tapper's life, what would it be?
So I can't do time travel. I can't do invisibility.
No, I'll give you some examples. One person said just the ability to heat up and make good the coffee at Fox as a mediocre superpower.
Okay. How about? Okay, here's a mediocre superpower. How about only needing 1 hour of sleep a day?
Oh, that would be a good one. Yeah.
If I only needed 1 hour of sleep a day, I could accomplish more, and I could I'm still not caught up on the Vietnam series on PBS. There's still
I haven't even started watching that yet.
Oh, it's so good, and it's so even-handed. It's just it's just
the Civil War is my favorite thing ever on TV, so I'm looking forward to this one.
So that's my mediocre superpower, only needing 1 hour sleep. I think that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I'll give you that one. I will give you that one. Mine is actually being able to sleep next to my wife at night without my arm falling asleep.
Without your arm falling asleep?
Yes.
You mean like under her?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, every time I can't actually in the wintertime when it's cold sleep next to my wife because my arm's going to fall asleep under her neck.
Oh yeah. No, well, that's nice. That's sweet. Now mine isn't as.
No, that's quite. Listen, an hour a night is
Yours
perfect.
Is all nice and sweet. Like you set me up. You set me up basically.
Totally setting. Yeah, totally unintentionally.
I'm not going to tell my wife to listen to this.
Yeah,
me too. That one too. That
yes.
I could cuddle with my wife more.
Totally. Yeah, that'll work. Well, listen. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your very busy day to do this. I really appreciate it and very much enjoy your show and what you do.
Thanks,
and
Eric.
Just your willingness to be fair to everybody and give everybody a hard time when they deserve it.
Thank you, sir. And I'm always thinking about you and your family, and I hope you guys are doing okay.
Thanks very much. We are. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.